This morning, Prema and I had a wonderful 40 minutes with Savitri also. And everybody, I feel, is making great progress. And this is very important. That I've done a series. It's not complete yet because a lot of it has to be uploaded. It's called the Savitri series, and it's on our YouTube site, Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And the Savitri series is simply everything Mother has said about Savitri. And it runs into many, many, many pages. She has said so much, even to me. So we can begin after a brief concentration. There was her drama's radiant prologue lived, a spot for the eternal's tread on earth, set in the cloistral yearning of the woods, and watched by the aspiration of the peaks, appeared through an aureate opening in time, where stillness, listening, felt the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. Well, this is where it is all going to happen. Her radiant prologue, he calls it a prologue here because she still has not conquered death. She is going to meet Satyavan, and shortly we're going to get into a passage, and I'll speak to you at great length on that passage. But right now we'll concern ourselves with her drama's radiant prologue. It is a spot for the eternal's tread on earth. This is what the divine has chosen. She has chosen to be here to meet her answering soul in the cloistral yearning of the woods. If any of you have ever been to a cloister, they're rather often very beautiful places. There's one in Upper New York City that I've been to many, many times because the garden is so charming and the feeling of the place is very meditative. So a cloister is a place of concentrated meditation, often silence, calm, peace. And so here, this cloistral yearning of the woods. Why should the woods be yearning? Well, they are aware that something is going to happen, and they are cloistered and yearning. And the peaks, the giant mountain peaks, which are the background of Satyavan's home, are also aspiring. And we say to ourselves, well, how can woods yearn and how can peaks aspire? But Mother makes this very clear to us. She says that nature has been working towards this progress in evolution for millennia. And in that progress, she realizes that she has all the time in the world, and even more than that. So the supermental would come out from nature perhaps in 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000, 10,000 years. But Mother wanted nature to collaborate, and this was her major confrontation with nature. When nature told her, I have all the time to change, why should I hurry? And Mother says to her, but you will become more beautiful if you collaborate with me. And actually, we are seeing that already. We are seeing that collaboration when nature agreed to work with Mother. We are seeing new flowers at rates I have never seen in my life. New colors are coming on into the earth. A greater beauty in the midst of all this turmoil that we have to go through. So yes, the woods are yearning and the peaks are aspiring, and appeared through a golden opening in time. So this spot appeared there, and it's where stillness, listening, has felt the unspoken word. And the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. I had a letter from a young man the other day who wrote a great amount of poetry when he was in a state of depression and grief and sorrow. And he says to me, why is so much poetry based on sorrow and grief? And I had to answer him that we are in an evolutionary phase. And if you look at Shakespeare's plays, most of them are tragedies. Very few are joyful and lighthearted. So here in this place, the hours forget to pass towards grief and change. So this is a place where Savitri's drama has her radiant prologue. It is a spot for the divine's tread on earth. It's chosen. And it's set in this cloistral yearning of the woods, and it's watched by the aspiration of the great peaks. And it appears through an aureate opening in time. And we've seen this also in the Canto on Satyabhan, where the the forest is so dense, but then there's one place where there's a field or a pasture, and the slumberous grasses are pranked with gold and green, and there's a supine breeze that runs over everything. And so actually here, it's a reflection of that also, because the hours are not passing towards grief and change, but they're expecting something much, much greater. And that will be this drama of Savitri. Would anyone else like to add anything to those few lines? Then perhaps we could have someone else read. Edith? Because this is a very important point, very important point.
Here, with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent, changing to rupture the dull earthly round, love came to her, hiding the shadow, death. Well might he find in her his perfect shrine.
Yes. The divine Advents often have a suddenness. Nothing was there, and suddenly there's this tremendous change. As we've seen when Krishna descended into Sri Aurobindo, or when Mother broke through the door and the supramental light flooded upon the earth. This is the suddenness of divine advents. And Advent is a spiritual happening. And it's repeating the marvel of the first descent. The first descent, Mother tells us in parable form, was 4 emanations that she sent down. One was love, one was truth. What are the others? Anybody?
Beauty.
Beauty, perhaps, yes. Anyway, all of these were the first advents. They did change into their opposites when these gods, if you will, these beings, these emanations, realized the power they had. And this is a kind of parable of the change into darkness. We have also this in the Bible to some extent. So it's repeating the marvel of the first descent, this suddenness of a divine advent. It's even changing to rapture, the dull earthly round. Because for most of us, we've experienced this dull earthly round very, very often. We just go around and around in the same way, and it's very dull. Only there are moments when we have a divine advent also, and it lifts us above the common wave of humanity. But then Sri Aurobindo surprises us, and he says that love came to her, but hiding the shadow, death. And now this next part is all about the God of love. And it's a beautiful passage because Sri Aurobindo speaks about love coming into Savitri and how only Savitri was the only place for him as his perfect shrine. Who would like to read next?
Since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race, never a rare creature bore his shaft, that burning test of the Godhead in our parts, a lightning from the heights on our abyss. All in her pointed to a nobler kind.
Okay, we have to study this at great length. Since our heavenward growth began, we as earth beings, through all the long ordeal of the race, well, we know how long this ordeal has been. It has been so trying that millions adopted in India the Buddhist way of escape into nirvana. Some of them classifying all of this earth as an illusion, and others saying that it is meaningless, and even others saying, well, there is a place, call it whatever you will, heaven or whatever, where we can go to get out of this long ordeal. But then he says, never a rarer creature bore his shaft, the shaft of love. And what is that shaft but the burning test of the Godhead in our parts? A lightning from the heights on our abyss, on our dark caverns, chasms. Many of us felt that immediately when we met the Mother. For me, I even felt the fire. She put it there. That burning test of the Godhead in our parts. A lightning from the heights on our abyss. Well, since we first began growing towards heaven, through all this long ordeal of the race, all the dualities of joy and sorrow and love and hate and truth and falsehood, only love could find his home, his perfect shrine in Savitri. And yet, he is hiding the shadow, death. He's not hiding death exactly, he's hiding the shadow, death. Obviously, because she is going to have to confront him, confront death. Now, we're getting very close to this new section that I want to talk about at great length. But let's finish with that line where Radha ended. All in her pointed to a nobler kind. Now that begins a passage that we'll see on the next page, but it sort of begins here. And thank you. And this would be good if someone could read this. We want to read it with as much joy and splendor as possible.
Near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large visioned spirit, voyaging through worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the ways of thought to unborn things.
He gives us the first glimpse of Savitri here. She is near to earth's wideness. She has descended from heaven, where she's, of course, still intimate with heaven, but she's near to earth's wideness also. And that was why, even though perhaps earth was not quite ready yet, Mother and Sri Aurobindo incarnated here. I know that in Mother's last darshan, she looked 3 times up like this in the sky, and I was told by someone who has the inner vision that she was looking at Sri Aurobindo, and each time she looked, he said, "Not yet ready." The earth was not yet ready for him to come down, to return. So, near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large vision spirit, voyaging through worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the ways of thought to unborn things. Now we see here that Sri Aurobindo uses a capital T for thought, which is very important here, because this is not just ordinary thought. This is all thinking, all thought. She's overflowing those ways of thought to things that are not yet born. And that's why Savitri has come to us. She is a self-born force, as is Aswapati. And both of those lines we will find in Savitri. So, any questions on those parts? Now we can go as slow as we want. If there are any questions in all of this that we've just read, where this moment now has come, it's watched by the aspiration of the peaks, and it appears through this golden opening in time, where stillness is listening, and it feels the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. And then he takes us by surprise. Here, with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent. So this whole thing is repeating this marvel of the first descent, the coming of the divine to earth. Of course, they have come many, many times, but he's speaking here of the first descent, changing to rapture, the dull earthly round, which we all know very well. Love comes to her. And this part is going to end in the last 4 lines of this canto about love and Savitri. So, there's no rarer creature on this earth that could bore the shaft of love than Savitri, or the Divine Mother. It is a burning test of the Godhead in our parts, because too often we can't handle it. It is just so powerful. When I left Mother after that first hour when I was with her, I wrote to her and I told her that you've turned my life upside down. Now what should I do? I'm only 23 years old. What should I do? Mother writes back to me. Oh, I asked her, should I continue studying conducting, choral conducting, or prepare for the Metropolitan Opera as I was doing when I was in a scholarship in Hunter College? Mother writes back, exactly. One or the other. Because the important thing is not so much what you choose, but the spirit in which you will do it. Keep living in you the spirit of consecration, and all will be all right. I didn't last very long in the ashram in those early days. It was too calm for me, for my wild vital, and I was only there for some months and had to go back. And the mother understood all of this, because when Jyotipriya wrote to her that I was destined to meet her, Mother wrote back, tell him he may come and stay as long as he likes. Mother knew I wouldn't stay very long. Anyway, to get back to Savitri, that burning test of the Godhead in our parts is so powerful that sometimes we cannot contain it, and it will take years and years before it becomes a part of us. It's a lightning from the heights on our abyss, on our lower parts. But in Savitri, all in her pointed to a nobler kind. She is very near to us, even now. What is the issue Upanishad line that you can give us, Vladimir?
Which line?
It seems far and is very close.
Okay. Yes.
Beautiful line.
Yes, that one ticket of, yes. He is far and he is near, he is outside and he is inside.
Yes.
And
I have it here, but I won't do the Sanskrit. I'll do Sri Aurobindo's translation. The one unmoving is swifter than thought. The gods cannot overtake it, for it travels ever in front. It moves, and it moves not. It is far away from us, and it is very close. That's on the last of the letters in Savitri. It's the very end. Sri Aurobindo writes, the gods of the overhead plains can do much to bridge that distance and to bring out that closeness, even if they cannot altogether overtake the reality that exceeds and transcends them. So, she voyages through worlds of splendor and of calm because she has an exalted, large-visioned spirit that is swift, able to overflew the ways of thought to unborn things. And now we're going to get into the passage I've been talking about. So perhaps, Vladimir, you could begin with that.
ardent was her self-poised, unstumbling will. Her mind a sea of white sincerity, passionate in flow, had not one turbid wave.
So we'll stop there because we have to, and the word is unstumbling, not unstumbling. It's
Right.
unstumbling. And many people I find say stumble, unstumbling, but it's just unstumbling.
Unstumbling will.
Yeah. Her will is ardent, self-poised, and unstumbling. Her mind is a sea of white sincerity, so passionate in flow that it doesn't even have one turbid wave. And then begins the passage that I consider possibly the highest overmental passage in Savitri. So Amal Kiran wrote to Sri Aurobindo asking him that very question. He says to Sri Aurobindo, he writes to Sri Aurobindo and he says, is this not the ne plus ultra of all poetry? And we can roughly translate that phrase from the French into that of which there is nothing higher. And Sri Aurobindo answers him for the first time in the positive. And he says, yes, it occurs here, and not too unoften in other passages. It is a description of Savitri that will end with the end of the canto. And we have to see, or attempt to see her as this priestess of immaculate ecstasies, who is in a mystic and dynamic dance. And I would like someone to, we may read it again and again for a while, because we have to digest the whole meaning of it. I'll tell us where we can stop. But so let's begin with, let's see, Ashwini, you haven't read yet. As in a mystic and dynamic dance.
As in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, inspired and ruled from truth's revealing vault, moves in some prophet cavern of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn that seemed a nick for veiled divinity, or golden temple door to things beyond.
Carry on.
Immortal rhythms swayed in her time-born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense, even in earth stuff, and their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's lives.
For the first time, Sri Aurobindo is describing the mother who incarnates as Savitri in the poem. And he begins, as he often does, as in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, inspired and ruled from truth's revealing vault, moves in some prophet cavern of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn that seemed a niche for veiled divinity, or golden temple door to things beyond. Immortal rhythms swayed in her time-born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense, even in earth stuff, and their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's lives. If we could feel this line, these lines, and really feel that Sri Aurobindo is telling us, giving us the vision of the Divine Mother. We will never forget these lines. I've memorized them for so many years because they are the highest of the high. And it continues. So someone else could read, perhaps Edith. And then we'll discuss it a little later. I want to keep the feeling of this passage going.
A wide self-giving was her native act. A magnanimity as of a sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all that came and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet, temperate sun. Her high passion, a blue heaven's equipoise. As might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storms, and a quiet reach like a remembered rest in a haven of safety and splendid soft repose. One could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambience, and preen joy in her warmth and colors rule.
Her look, this is all Mother. When we were before Mother, this is exactly what we felt. We felt her bright nature's glorious ambience. We could preen joy in her warmth. We knew that whatever she said to us, even if she scolded us, it was kindly care. So let me go back a little bit to perhaps the top here of her look. Her smile awoke celestial sense, even in earth stuff. And this is Sri Aurobindo's humor, a bit of his humor, because even in our crude, humble human bodies, there awoke a celestial sense. And the intense delight of that poured a supernal, we can say heavenly beauty on men's lives. Now, what made that possible? Well, firstly, a wide self-giving was her native act. That self-giving was so vast that often Mother's secretaries had to wait for hours and hours to see her because there were so many people in line to meet her. And each of us was given a time when we could meet her. Sometimes it would only be 5 or 10 minutes, other times it could be longer. It depended all on Mother. And that wide self-giving would keep her up till 2 in the morning, and then she would be up again at 6 in the morning to see people. She gave everything of herself. This magnanimity as of sea or sky, it was that great. It was a magnanimity that was equal to the sea or the sky. And it enveloped with its greatness all that came. Everyone, or almost everyone, was so deeply touched by her and can still be and are. All that come to this yoga are blessed. And it gave all of us a sense as of a great in the world. It was a new world for all of us the moment we met Mother. The moment we read Sri Aurobindo, whether it's Life Divine Synthesis of Yoga, Savitri, the Human Cycle, it always gives us a sense as of a great in the world. Her kindly care was a sweet, temperate sun. It never burned us. Sweet, yes, always sweet. When you would enter Mother's room, she would be even at the age of 90 and more, she would greet you with the most wonderful bonjour or bonne fête if it was your birthday. And her high passion was a blue heavens equipoise. So perfect. And then he gives us this wonderful, wonderful 2 lines. As might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storms. How often we want to get out of that world of storms. And the only way is to reach a quiet like the remembered breast of the mother. We could put our head on her feet, in her lap. Little children often would hold her finger. So we can reach that quiet most easily, for me at least, with the japa of her name. I, the mother, Ma, or Om Namo Bhagavate. And then in that haven of safety and splendid soft repose, we could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambience, and preen joy in her warmth and colors rule. Vladimir, read the next passage for us. Next part of the passage, because we want to get all of this.
Deep of compassion, a hushed sanctuary. Her inward help unbarred a gate in heaven. Love in her was wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell, vacant of the dwarf self's imprisoned air. Her mood could harbor his sublime breath, spiritual that can make all things divine. For even her gulfs were secrecies of light.
At once, she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire, the strength, the silence of the gods were hers. In her, he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether he refound and moved in her as in his natural home. In her, he met his own eternity. And that is the end of the passage. So we'll go back up and look into it as deeply as possible. So this is where we are. We find that the mother is a deep of compassion. She's a hushed sanctuary. And her inward help can unbar a gate in heaven. That help is ever present. She's even freer now as she rebuilds the future body. As she begins, she's already begun building her future body. She's spoken about this body. I have seen her in this body. And we see that all of this compassion, this hushed sanctuary, helps us from her inner being to unbar the gate in heaven. And now he begins to speak of love again. And love here is, I know it's capitalized because it's the beginning of the line, but it's also capitalized because it's love. It's the God of love. Love in her was wider than the universe. Imagine that. Wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell. Again, love. Because Savitri does not have the dwarf self's imprisoned air, her mood is able to harbor his sublimer breath that is spiritual and can make all things divine. And then he says, for even her gulfs were secrecies of light. At once, she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace. Well, when Mother first came on the ship, when she was 10 kilometers away from Pondicherry, she felt Sri Aurobindo's presence, his force, this continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire, pure, pure fire. The strength, the silence of the gods were hers. In her, back to love again, he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether, he refound. He refound it. How did he refind it? Well, because the name of love is truly bastardized in the modern world. We say love for everything. We don't, this is not that kind of love. Not at all. This is a warm, subtle ether of love. And therefore, he's able to move in Savitri as in his natural home. And in her, he meets his own eternity. We have some time yet. Would someone like to read the entire passage from the beginning as in a mystic and dynamic dance?
I can read.
Okay.
As in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, inspired and ruled from truth's revealing bowl, moves in some prophet cavern of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn that seemed a niche for veiled divinity, or golden temple door to things beyond. Immortal rhythms swayed in her time-worn steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense, even in earth stuff, and their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's lives. A wide self-giving was her native act, a magnanimity as of sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all that came, and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet, temperate sun, her high passion a blue heaven's equipoise. As might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storms, and a quiet reach like a remembered breast, in a haven of safety and splendid soft repose. One could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambience, and preen joy in her warmth and colors room. A deep of compassion, a hushed sanctuary, her inward health unbarred a gate in heaven. Love in her was wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell. Vacant of the dwarf self's imprisoned air, her mood could harbor his sublimer breath. Spiritual that can make all things divine, for even her gulfs were secrecies of light. At once she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire. The strength, the silence of the gods were hers. In her he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether he refound, and moved in her as in his natural home. In her he met his own eternity.
Perhaps next Sunday we could redo this passage, and maybe all of you could try to memorize it. It is one of the greatest passages in all of Savitri, in Sri Aurobindo's description of Mother. And it will find a place in your soul if you approach it with humility and gratitude. Namaste.